Please, sir. Just down the road. The voice was a whisper of dry dust and sheer exhaustion. It was the kind of plea that shouldn't exist on the edge of Route 16, a lonely two-lane ribbon of asphalt cutting through the high desert of Nevada. The sun was a brutal, orange fist sinking below the craggy mountains, turning the sky into a bruise. Eliza Eli Vance, a freelance trucker with a heavy heart and a heavier debt, had pulled her semi-truck, a beat-up Freightliner named Vagrant, onto the shoulder for a mandatory rest stop. She was about to slam the cab door shut when she saw him. He was tiny, maybe 10 years old, a silhouette against the dying light. His clothes, once a bright blue hoodie and jeans, were now just shades of grime. But it was his eyes, huge, unnervingly still, and radiating a terror that went bone deep, that froze Eli. He gripped a worn, olive-green canvas duffel bag that looked heavier than he was. An unnatural quiet hung around him, the kind that screamed wrong place, wrong time, wrong situation. He was too polished, too well-mannered for a runaway, yet too desperate for anything else. Eli, a woman who had seen too much darkness to ignore a flicker of light, found herself slowly, against all common sense, lowering the window. Eli's stretch of Route 16 was normally the exclusive domain of chrome-plated outlaw bikers and legitimate, but equally tough, long haulers, people who preferred isolation and minded their own business. The sight of the boy here was like a diamond ring found in a mud puddle, deeply out of place and likely concealing a dark history. A few hundred yards away, two massive Harleys, their engines a low, guttural growl, pulled into a gas station Eli had just passed. The riders, men with faces carved from granite and leather vests that broadcast their loyalties, paused their conversation, their eyes scanning the highway in the boy's direction. Eli felt the familiar, cold knot of suspicion tighten in her stomach. The biker culture out here, she knew, was a complicated tapestry of camaraderie and danger. She watched the boy closely. He didn't cry or shout, he simply stood rigid, his breath coming in shallow pants. The contrast between his absolute, almost fragile, innocence and the desolate, hostile desert landscape was jarring. Eli noticed a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his hands as he clutched the canvas bag. This wasn't a kid ditching school, this was survival. She had a strict policy of no hitchhikers, but the calculating glance from one of the bikers toward the boy sealed her decision. Instinct took over. She leaned across the worn passenger seat, her voice low and rough as gravel. "Get in. Now." The boy scrambled into the cab with the desperate efficiency of a seasoned traveler. He didn't waste time with pleasantries or explanations. He just sat, his back pressed against the door, the heavy duffel bag resting on the floor between his small boots. Eli slammed the door shut, gunned the diesel engine, and pulled the Vagrant back onto the highway, her eyes focused on the rearview mirror. The bikers, she noted, were just now getting back on their bikes. Too close. "What's your name, kid?" she asked, her voice firm, transactional. "Liam," he managed. His voice cracked with a fear he was trying hard to swallow. I need to get to Vegas. My grandmother. Vegas is 4 hours, kid. What's going on? Who are those guys?" She pointed her chin toward the mirror. Liam flinched, pulling the bag closer. "They're not good people. They took my dad. And they want this." He nudged the heavy canvas bag with his foot. He looked up at Eli, his young eyes holding a clarity that belied his age. "They said if they found me, they'd hurt everyone who helped me. I told them I wouldn't tell anyone what was inside. But they don't believe me." The confession was a torrent of forced words. His problem wasn't a runaway parent or a lost dog, it was far heavier. Eli suddenly realized the stakes were much higher than a simple rescue. The bag, she instinctively knew, was the key. Symbolic? No. Decisive. Eli didn't need Liam to spell out drug cartel or witness protection. The weight of the silence, the cold look in the biker's eyes, and the specific route she was on told her enough. These weren't petty criminals. These were predators. She saw a flash of chrome and black leather in her side mirror. The Harleys were closing the gap, maintaining a menacing, silent pursuit. They were relentless, patient, and absolutely certain of their target. "They're not going to try anything out here," Eli muttered, more to herself than to Liam. "Too many witnesses, even if they're miles apart." But her voice lacked conviction. They were 2 against several, and she was in a slow, massive truck. Liam, sensing the inevitable, reached down and slowly, reluctantly, unzipped the duffel bag. "You don't have to help me anymore, ma'am. You can drop me off at the next town and they'll only follow me." Eli glanced down at the bag, a brief flash of curiosity overriding her survival instinct. She was expecting a stack of money, a stolen hard drive, or maybe a tiny, incriminating weapon. She was ready to be angry, to demand he get out and protect her own neck. But what she saw in the dim light of the cab was none of those things. It wasn't about money or data, it was about something far more vital and infinitely more dangerous. The sight of it was a punch to her gut, an instant shift in the narrative. The danger, she realized, wasn't the duffel bag itself, but the moral weight it represented. The choice was stark: abandon the child to save herself, or risk everything for a desperate act of righteousness. The Harleys were now close enough that Eli could almost make out the cold, determined expressions of the men. There was no going back. One of the bikers, a man with a thick, predatory mustache, expertly zipped his bike ahead of the vagrant and slammed on the brakes, forcing Eli to mash her own, sending a violent shudder through the massive truck. The second Harley positioned itself directly alongside her cab. Confrontation was here. Eli threw the truck into park and leaned on the air horn, a loud, defiant bellow that echoed across the empty desert. She threw open her door and descended, her tall, lean frame meeting the cold, hard stare of the lead biker. "Move your junk, friend," Eli's voice was surprisingly calm. "The kid. Hand him and his bag over, and you can keep driving." Vagrant, the biker, whose vest bore the patch of a ruthless, organized outfit, drawled, his hand resting casually on a pistol tucked into his belt. Suddenly, Liam, despite Eli's frantic gesture for him to stay put, was beside her. He looked the massive, dangerous man in the eye. He didn't whimper. He didn't plead. He was 10 years old, standing on the hot asphalt, radiating a steely resolve that astonished Eli. "He doesn't have to hand me over," Liam said, his voice now steady and clear. He held up the heavy canvas bag, its zipper open just enough to reveal the contents: a small, battered medical kit and a clear plastic bag containing 6 vials of a precious, life-saving medication. "My father was a pharmacist. He was going to deliver this. It's for 6 kids in Vegas who have a rare blood disease. If you take this, you're not taking a ransom. You're taking 6 lives." The revelation of the medicine, not contraband, but a cure, was a stunning, symbolic act of courage. It stripped the conflict down to its purest form: evil against essential human compassion. The lead biker's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. This wasn't the score they'd been promised. Before the man could fully process the moral gravity of Liam's words, Eli delivered a short, sharp kick to the bike's stand, sending the Harley crashing down, the biker yelping as he tried to catch the steel behemoth. Eli grabbed Liam and shoved him back into the cab, scrambling after him just as the second biker reacted. With a roar of the engine and a plume of black smoke, the vagrant fishtailed back onto the highway, leaving the downed bike and the shocked men in the dust. The confrontation was won by a kick, a lie, and the unassailable truth revealed in a small bag. Eli drove hard for an hour, pushing the vagrant past her safe limits, until she was certain the bikers were no longer a threat. The adrenaline slowly faded, leaving a hollow ache of exhaustion. Liam, now curled up on the passenger seat, the bag clutched to his chest, was silent, the previous terror replaced by a deep, shuddering relief. The immediate danger was gone. The villains, now stranded and temporarily defeated, would likely regroup but wouldn't follow. Liam had saved the medicine, and Eli had saved him. But the victory felt fleeting. Eli pulled into a massive, anonymous truck stop outside Barstow, the kind of place where 100 stories started and ended every day. "The medicine needs to get to the St. Jude's affiliate in Vegas by morning," Liam whispered, his voice small again. "It's the only shipment they had." Eli nodded. That was a fixed point. But once the life-saving delivery was made, what then? Liam had named his grandmother, but his family had been targeted by a dangerous organization. He was a witness, a child with no safe harbor, who had just spent his last reserves of courage. "Okay, Liam. We get the medicine there." "Then what?" "You're a minor. And you're not safe. Where does a kid with a price on his head go when the road runs out?" The victory was hollow. The end of the chase was the beginning of an impossible journey. The delivery to Vegas was a tense, successful blur. Liam was debriefed by a kindly, but firm, social worker who confirmed the situation's severity. Liam wasn't just a boy, he was a living threat to a criminal operation and was put under emergency protective services. The bikers' organization was far-reaching. The immediate solution was a secure foster home, but Liam had another idea. "I want to stay with Eli," he announced to the social worker and a weary-looking police detective, his small chin jutting out stubbornly. "She's the only one who didn't ask me what was in the bag, only if I was okay." The idea was absurd. Eli was a transient, a woman whose home was a semi-truck cab, with a rap sheet that included a minor disorderly conduct charge from 10 years prior. But the detective, sensing the boy's trauma and the genuine, if rough-edged, connection between the two, gave Eli temporary emergency custody under the supervision of the social worker, Ms. Reyes. The Vagrant, the hard-nosed freightliner, became a makeshift sanctuary. Eli, a woman whose entire existence was predicated on emotional distance, was now forced into nurturing. She spent a week dealing with small, forgotten human concerns, buying Liam clothes that fit, not easy for a lanky 10-year-old, finding a new backpack, and setting up a routine. She found herself cooking proper meals instead of just reheating truck stop chili. Liam, in turn, began to fill the vast, lonely silence in the cab, not with chatter, but with small gestures of trust. He'd read aloud from a worn copy of The Hobbit while Eli drove. She learned to talk to him about the loss of his father, not as a trauma, but as a sacrifice. Her hardened exterior began to crack, replaced by a fierce, maternal protectiveness she hadn't known she possessed. She traded her preferred solitude for the relentless, exhausting, but ultimately rewarding challenge of caring for a traumatized child. The initial emergency placement quickly led to the formal custody hearing. The system, represented by a stern, skeptical Judge Harding and a cautious Ms. Reyes, had to decide Liam's long-term future. The setting was clinical, cold, and utterly opposed to the chaotic, loving bond forged on the highway. The prosecutor's case was devastatingly simple. Eli Vance was deemed unfit, a transient truck driver with no stable address, an outstanding debt, and a long history of self-isolation. Her appearance, defined by worn jeans, a faded bandana, and a few faded tattoos, screamed dangerous in the sterile courtroom. How can this court possibly justify placing a vulnerable child, a witness to a serious crime, with a woman whose entire life is on the road, whose only home is a 20-ton vehicle? The prosecutor challenged, his voice dripping with moral superiority. Ms. Reyes, however, spoke about the profound change she had witnessed. Eli had given up high-paying, long-haul routes for shorter, local ones to enroll Liam in a school in Barstow. She spoke of the care Eli showed, the subtle, nonverbal ways she was healing Liam's deep-seated trauma. Then, it was Liam's turn. He walked to the stand, wearing a new, simple shirt, but his voice was the same one that defied a biker on Route 16. "Your Honor," he began, ignoring the prosecutor's attempts to guide him, "my old home was a big, fancy house. It was safe, until it wasn't. They say Eli's truck is not a good home, but they don't see what's inside." He looked directly at the judge. "The bag that saved me? It had medicine in it." Eli didn't know that. She saw a scared kid and helped anyway. Other people saw the tattoos and the big truck and they only saw danger. Eli saw me. She gave me the one thing a kid like me needs, a route to a future, not just a ride out of a bad place. She might be on the road, but she's the only safe harbor I've ever known. She is my home. The testimony wasn't a child's plea, it was a decisive moral declaration that shattered the court's rigid judgment. Judge Harding, a woman known for her no-nonsense demeanor, paused, the silence in the courtroom charged with a palpable emotional release. She looked at the weary, fierce Eli, then at the small, resolute Liam. "The court's priority is stability, safety, and emotional well-being," the judge stated, her voice regaining its professional tone, but softer now. Based on the boy's exceptional testimony, the social worker's report, and the demonstrably life-altering changes made by Ms. Vance in the past months, I am granting temporary, supervised legal guardianship to Eliza Vance, effective immediately, with a review in 1 year. Ms. Vance, you are now responsible for this young man. Do not fail him." A collective gasp of relief and quiet joy swept through the small group. Eli, a woman who rarely showed emotion, simply nodded, a single, genuine tear tracing a clean path through the grime on her cheek. The battle with the system was won. The unconventional family was officially formed. Liam ran to Eli, wrapping his arms around her waist, and she hugged him back, an awkward, fierce, protective embrace. The Freightliner Vagrant was no longer just a truck, it was a home, one built not on blood or real estate, but on a foundation of shared sacrifice and deep-seated, unexpected love. 3 years later. The Vagrant still rolls, but her route is now a dependable circuit, Barstow to Phoenix, back to Vegas, always home by Friday evening. The cab is no longer just a place to sleep, a tiny, custom-built shelf holds Liam's high school textbooks and a framed photo of his father. Liam, now 13, tall and confident, is a straight-A student, talking seriously about college. His canvas duffel bag, the one that held the medicine, is now his gym bag, a constant, tangible reminder of the day that changed everything. Eli, too, is unrecognizable. She repaid her debts, formed a small, successful, independent trucking company, and even bought a small, 2-bedroom trailer in a quiet community near the school. She still drives, finding solace and purpose on the open road, but she never drives alone. More importantly, the network that saved Liam, the compassionate detective, the tireless social worker, the small community of good-hearted truckers Eli befriended, led to the formation of the Route 16 Compassion Network, a non-profit organization Eli and Liam now help run. Its mission is to connect traumatized children found on the road with stable, safe, temporary caregivers, utilizing the vast, often lonely, but ultimately honorable network of America's long-haul truckers. The story of the boy in the bag, the child who proved that the most valuable thing in the world is not power or money, but vulnerable human life, became an urban legend on the highway, a whisper of hope in the vast desert. The lesson was simple, yet profound, one that Eli often repeated in her talks to new drivers: the road will always test you. But what you carry in your heart is always heavier, and infinitely more precious, than anything you haul in your trailer.